My name is Jeff Tully, and I'd like to welcome you here today for what's going to be a pretty rapid-fire session, looking at as much as we can get today on Your Next TV. Hope that you've visited our website and seen a little bit of an overview. We're not going to spend a lot of time introducing each of the speakers. Their bios are up online. We want to use the time for them to get some of their ideas across to you. We also want to encourage you to visit that website after the event. We are recording all of these proceedings, and they will be posted online. In addition, if we do not get to issues in Q&A, please feel free. Scott Wilkinson and myself will be around during and after the event here. If you have questions that you'd like have put to the any of the speakers during the day, if you can jot them down, hand them to either Scott or myself. We're going to be conducting follow-up video interviews that will also be posted on the website as part of the proceedings of this event. So without getting a lot more here, I'd like to start our first session here. We've invited back from last year, those of you who were with us, three of our analysts of the industry to give us their take on by the numbers. What are the trends and forecasts? Last year we focused almost exclusively on Ultra HD and 4K. This year we have a little broader net. There are more features and functions in the various devices that are coming to deliver digital entertainment in the living room. And we invite you to listen and learn and interact with us as much as possible. I'll start out with Paul Gagnon. Paul from NPD Display Search will kick off our presentations.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. All right, we're good to go. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the industry, so thanks for listening to what I have to say. So my name is Paul Gagnon. I'm the Director of Global TV Research for NPD Display Search. I've been covering this industry for over a decade now, and certainly a lot of changes in the TV market. I thought I would talk a little bit of today a focus on 4K and the TV market, and kind of set the stage a little bit with background information about what's going on in the global television business and what's happening in terms of transitioning from new technologies like 4K when they first emerged to kind of the mass market, which I think we're just about to kick off that transition. A little bit of a reminder, so NPD Display Search is a wholly owned subsidiary of the NPD Group, which is, I think, very familiar to most people in the industry. We do a lot of supply chain focused research, so tracking television products from their inception as materials like glass and chips, all the way through to the point where they're sold into the retail channel, and then NPD tracks what happens after that point, so the sale of those products to consumers, and then some consumer research to follow up on. So just a little bit of background of who we are and what we cover. So I thought I would start off with a kind of general overview of what's going on in the global TV business. And it's certainly been a pretty interesting marketplace over the last decade or so. We went through a period of very rapid growth, partly fueled by the transition from analog to digital, as well as the transition from CRT to flat panel TVs. And there were a number of years where we saw very strong, steady growth. That growth peaked, though, back around 2011 timeframe, and since then we've actually been declining somewhat on a global basis. So television shipments worldwide have fallen for each of the last 3 years or so, and we think that this year, on a global basis, we're going to tread sideways. We're not really going to see a lot of growth. And then eventually, over the next several years, we're expecting a slight uptick. And where that growth comes from matters. So I'll talk a little bit about where we expect to see that growth. It's also interesting to note in this chart how LCD TVs have really captured almost 100% of the global TV marketplace from a shipments perspective. There are still lots of CRT televisions out there. And as those get replaced, gradually, we'll start to see the install base switch more to 100% LCD, and then people will start upgrading those LCDs with LCDs, or maybe a new technology like OLED TV. If we look at kind of differences between regions, we break out the world into two basic types of regions. We have what we call developed regions, which includes here the US, North America market, as well as Japan and Western Europe. And then we also have the emerging market, which includes regions like Latin America, Asia Pacific, China, Middle East and Africa, Eastern Europe, And those are the regions where we've been seeing more of the growth in recent years. We went through this bubble period a few years back in these developed regions where growth was accelerated by rapidly falling prices, government stimulus activity, but very importantly, the switchover from analog to digital broadcasts. Now that that has been completed, we've seen much lower levels of TV shipments in these regions, while the emerging regions continue to grow, although the growth rate has been slower. And that's cause for concern for many in the industry, because if the emerging markets aren't growing as well, where do we look for, what regions do we look for growth, both in terms of units as well as in dollars and profits? And there's been a change in focus. We've seen the television manufacturers, particularly from China, increase in market share. A lot of the Korean brands have gained a lot of market share in recent years and are somewhat stable now, while the Japanese manufacturers from a shipment perspective have been gradually declining. So there's kind of a shift going on in terms of the focus from a brand perspective, but also from a supply chain perspective. If you look at where the televisions are manufactured, where flat panel displays are sourced from, more and more of those are coming from China. And in particular, over the next several years, 3-4 years, there is going to be a lot of additional capacity built in China, and a lot of that focus is on technologies like 4K. It's no longer the case that new emerging technologies like 4K or perhaps even OLED are exclusive to regions like Japan or China. Japanese manufacturers have been producing high-end displays for many years, as have Korean manufacturers. But the gap in technology between China and Japan and China and Korea, as well as with Taiwan, has really narrowed. And so you're seeing a lot of interest in terms of both domestic consumption in regions like China, but also in exports. So those Chinese manufacturers are looking to ship their products elsewhere, including here in the US, Western Europe, and other countries. So here in the North America market, which we define as the United States and Canada, again, we went through a period of pretty strong growth, partly fueled by the transition to flat panels, but also the analog to digital broadcast transition. And since those were completed, we've kind of stagnated, and growth has been hard to come by. So we went from these very rapid growth years to what have generally been soft or weak years. We've seen small single-digit unit declines over the last several years. We think that's starting to stabilize, and our forecast shows a small uptick. And part of the reason for that is a lot of that demand we feel was accelerated or pulled in by the analog to digital broadcast transition, and now that that's been completed, people are going back to their normal buying cycles. And as they do, those flat panel TVs will come up for replacement in the next several years, according to some of our consumer research. So we're a little optimistic that slight unit growth is potentially lies ahead. But there are a lot of factors that are critical, especially replacement activity or driving consumers to go and purchase a new TV. Why do they do that? Most often they do it to replace upgrade in screen size, but also possibly to replace it with better technology from sets like 4K televisions. So again, a lot of uncertainty in this outlook, but I think that the biggest growth factor will be getting people to come in and replace their TVs faster than they have in the past. So when it comes to features, we've looked at features like 3D, which rose to a lot of fanfare. A lot of companies in the industry expected 3D to mark a new transition, a new type of TV. And it really didn't, especially here in the North America marketplace. It didn't take off in a big way. And so that particular revolution never really occurred. You look at a feature like LED. And LED grew in market share in all of these regions quite rapidly, and in fact is nearly 100% of LCD TV shipments in each of the regions that we track. What was different about LED versus 3D? The biggest difference is the manufacturers pushed that market forward by bringing the price premiums down, essentially transitioning away from CCFL products and only shipping LED products, but at an acceptable premium. The same thing didn't happen with 3D. Could it happen with 4K? That's a possibility. If we look at a feature like connected TVs or internet-enabled TVs, those also have grown in market share, but again, the premiums haven't dropped as quickly as LED, and manufacturers haven't necessarily pulled away connected options. So as the market grows for connected TVs, it's mostly doing so because consumers are interested in that there's content to watch, that the premiums are not too steep, they're acceptable, and there's something to watch on them. So Connected TV is still in a growth phase. We think it'll continue to grow, perhaps not as aggressively as the LED marketplace did, though. So what about 4K? What's going to drive a transition to a new resolution like 4K? Certainly, product premiums have a very important role. And what this chart shows is for various configurations of LCD TV panels, a 55 inches used in this example, what does it cost to step up to 4K? What does it cost to step up to other features like curved displays, for example? And you can see that as of today, the premiums for these panels is actually quite low. And if you look at it, depending on whether or not you use a technology like full 4K, or there's actually a new 4K technology that uses red, green, blue, and white subpixels, sometimes called green UHD, those premiums can actually fall to less than 10%. And that is really going to fuel a reduction in costs for 4K televisions in the marketplace. And we think that's coming very soon. And as you step up to features like curved displays or even bendable displays, the premiums do step up from there. But it's possible for a feature like 4K to fall pretty quickly in terms of price premium. Also depends on the configuration of the product. So our forecast for 4K televisions, both worldwide and in the US marketplace, is fairly aggressive. So in the North America market this year, we're expecting a little over 800,000 units. I've heard goals of anywhere between 1 and 1.5 million from the manufacturers. So there's growth potential here. I think most of this comes in the second half of the year. The other thing to note is that the worldwide numbers for 4K are quite aggressive. And a lot of that is fueled by China. So Chinese TV manufacturers in China are selling 4K TVs for very, very little premium. And people are starting to buy them, and they have huge ambitious growth plans. So some of that's going to translate to the North America marketplace. And what will the premiums look like? If you look back at last year, for example, the premiums were over 6 times as high for the average 4K TV versus a full HD TV. And those premiums over the next year or so are going to drop to less than 2x. And in all likelihood, for some of these larger screen sizes, we'll start to see the full HD option fade away. And manufacturers will do that push conversion to 4K, just like they did with the LED market, mainly, again, at larger screen sizes. So that's our view of the marketplace. If you have any questions, my email is up here, and you can ask them later as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And now we'll hear from Jack Wetherill. Jack from Future Source. Take a slightly different angle on the forecast.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm waiting for my presentation to appear on the screen. There it is. My name's Jack Wetherill. I'm from Future Source Consulting. I've been given 10 minutes to talk about the ultra-high definition TV market. 10 minutes is about as rapid as England's exit from the World Cup this year. But I'll do my best to rival that at least. For those of you who aren't familiar with Future Source Consulting, we've been researching and reporting upon the home entertainment market for, 20 years or more. We report upon the hardware, so obviously TVs, set-top boxes, Blu-ray players, camcorders, smartphones, tablets, etc. But also upon the content. So the content being broadcast television, games, home video, etc. And the means by which the content reaches the screens. So that in the past has often been disc and tape, video on demand, broadband, and now, of course, moving into the cloud as well. So we report both nationally and internationally on this, these markets. The data I'm going to show you today is actually focused very much on the US. Those of you who were here last year may remember this slide which I showed, which was talking really about the factors that need to fall into place for ultra-high definition to become accepted and used by mainstream. And there are 4 factors: affordable TV sets, content availability, delivery infrastructure, and also consumer acceptance. So this chart was from a year ago, and the question is, what pieces of those jigsaw are actually moving into place? How far have we moved on in the last year, and how much further is there to go? I've got a chart here which is actually echoing almost exactly what Paul showed, so I'm going to skip through this one very quickly. But effectively, what it's showing is how the global TV market grew to around 2011, the flat panel boom, etc. And since that point, the market has been in decline by around 6% in unit terms in 2012, 3% in 2013. And the TV manufacturers are thinking hard, obviously, about how on earth to keep this market rejuvenated. You know, where is going to be the next sales of TVs coming from? If those don't sound too dramatic, that 2% decline last year or 3% decline, if you look at the core markets, you know, you can see that there are some real problems. That yes, there are areas, there are countries where there is still organic growth available, you know, China, Russia, Brazil, etc. But the traditionally strong core markets are really suffering. All those lines in red there, you know, anything from North America, which is just minus 2%, right the way through to Germany and France, 18, 19%, Japan in there as well. So, you know, the valuable markets are really under pressure. So yes, consumers obviously they're always going to want you know, the best picture they can get on a TV set, but they're not shouting for it. But the industry is pushing ultra high definition very hard as a result of these factors. We knew this a year ago that it was going to be a factor, but during the course of last year, what was it, 80,000 units or so shipped in the US. And only China was a significant market. However, at CES, we saw massive activity, a massive upsurge, a real underlining of the point that Ultra HD is what's going to be the next big thing. And this was from pushing 20 different manufacturers, the A brands, but also Chinese brands pushing hard, Hisense, Haier, Skyworth, etc. So now, here we are, a year on from the last conference, and we have a very crowded slide. I'm sorry, you probably can't read this at the back, because the screens are smaller than last year, but the fact that this slide is so crowded is an indication of how crowded the Ultra HD market is becoming. We've got 50-plus sets available now in the US. Yes, there are niche models right up there at 84, 105-inch, $12,000, $30,000, however much you want to pay. But the key point here, that's what's been moving on, is that the pricing has been coming down. You can now get 49-inch, 50-inch sets for $1,500, 55-inch sets from $2,000 upwards. And the key battlegrounds are the 55 and 65-inch you know, areas. But perhaps more significantly, in some ways, is towards the lower end. On the left-hand side, you've got cheapness and smaller screen size. And yes, we've got Chinese brands still in there. But Samsung, I don't think it's available yet in the US. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in the UK, there's a Samsung model out for 40 inches, a 40-inch ultra-high definition set for the equivalent of $1,700. Now, ultra high definition in such small panels, one could argue, well, you know, what's the point? Why would anybody want to buy a panel which is so small, effectively? Will they see the difference? Well, in some ways, that's missing the point. We've seen this with high definition. You can buy 19-inch sets, which are high definition. Can you actually spot high definition in such a small screen? Well, not really, but that's the way it is, and that's the way we believe the market will go for ultra high definition as well. As time goes by, it will become an increasingly a kind of a standard fit, if you like. So one of the pieces of the jigsaw, therefore, the TV sets is rapidly falling into place, more rapidly than one might have previously imagined. On the slide I'm showing now is about consumer acceptance, how important that is. Now, Future Source Consulting conducts so-called Living with Digital consumer research, where we ask people about their digital lifestyles, what they own, what they think. And we asked them in the US, France, Germany, and the UK, had they heard of ultra-high definition or 4K TV sets? And interestingly, actually 42% had already heard of ultra-high definition. And then we asked everybody, even those who hadn't heard of it, if you were offered the opportunity to buy a TV set which had an even better picture than you get with high definition, would you be interested in buying one? And actually 44% said that they were either reasonably or extremely interested in buying such a set. Only 24% said they really didn't care. So yeah, that's consumer research, and it can change from one day to the next depending on people's mood. But it does indicate that there is interest. People are always interested in getting a better picture on their TV set. Now, this is our outlook for 4K or ultra-high-definition TV set uptake in the US. We have, by year 7, so year 7 is 2018, so year 7 since launch of ultra-high-definition, a quarter of homes in the US owning at least one ultra-high-definition TV set. Now, that is actually a lower trajectory than we saw for flat panel HD, which was launched in 2004, if I remember rightly. A much lower trajectory, but as Paul referred to earlier on, high definition rose so rapidly on the back of other factors, including digital switchover and also just the transition, frankly, from CRT to flat panel. So ultra high definition doesn't have those advantages. In terms of actual numbers, we estimate that just over 1 million units will ship this year in the US, so that's 3% of the market. And by 2016, it'll be more like 15% of the market, which is 5.7 million units. And then by 2018, you're looking near half of the market. So basically Ultra HD being pushed right the way through the model ranges more quickly than expected. But of course, still trending towards the larger screens. But then the US, compared to so many markets, is a larger screen market in any case. In terms of pricing, a couple of years ago, average price was $9,500. This year, more like $2,000 if you take the full year into account. That's our forecast for the average retail price. And by 2016, maybe $1,500. So pricing coming down dramatically, bringing people into the market. Now, it's one thing to actually own such a set, but what about the content? Just a little piece here before I wrap up. How will content get to people's homes, and will it? Well, and should we worry about this? Well, if we look at what happened with high definition, maybe we shouldn't worry quite so much, because in 2013, 84% of households in the US owned a high-definition TV set. But in terms of actually receiving a feed, a high-definition TV feed, the availability is that much lower. Whether people haven't chosen to take up an HD feed, perhaps that's more likely, so they're not that fussed even though they've got an HD set. But we figure that around a third of homes that have an HD set don't actually have an HD signal. And if my hotel room over the last few nights has been anything to go by, frankly, it's more or less black and white still where I am. So looking again about the content, how will content get to the home? Well, at the moment, as I said, it's very, very thin on the ground. You've got the preloaded drives from Samsung and Sony. We've got over-the-top services, much vaunted from Netflix, of course, and IP-delivered services are obviously, making a lot of inroads. When it comes to the pay TV operators, we know that they've been scarred by 3D. They made a lot of investments, and they're holding back rather more than they would have done. It's a cautious approach, and so Comcast, DirecTV, we're going to be looking at services which are, on demand, event-led, rather than full linear channels initially, and also delivered over the top rather than by a more traditional means. Packaged media, well, packaged media is in decline these days anyhow, but Blu-ray will have a place to play. However, the standard isn't yet organised. By the time it's been licensed as well, it's going to be the end of next year earliest before the hardware comes out. Now, this is just more or less the final slide, effectively laying out our landscape for ultra high definition, if you like. This is in the US. So, as I mentioned, by 2018, a quarter of homes with ultra high definition set. Less than 10% able to receive a high definition or ultra high definition TV signal. Those with an ultra-high definition Blu-ray player, less than 5%. Meanwhile, over 60% and possibly well beyond that, able to receive internet at 15 megabits a second or better. And why do I pick on that figure? Yeah, because that's what Netflix tell us and tell you is good for a 4K experience of streamed. So ultra-high definition, one of the first ways, and for quite some time, maybe online is the way forward. So here we are, key takeaways, ultra-high definition here to stay. The hardware industries need high definition. TV set scenario will echo HD in that the hardware will be there way before the content. The streaming services will gear up the service while pay TV and packaged media get their act together. And frankly, upscaling will be a stopgap for many years to come. Consumers being told that 4K sets are future-proof and that you can just you can upscale for now, and then the content will follow. Okay, I've been timed out. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass over to Sean. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Yeah, so let's go ahead if we'll pull up my slides. Thanks, Jack and Paul. So let me, I get the joy of the last 3 minutes where I get to essentially build off of what both of them said. So let me just kind of jump in where Paul sees a flat TV market in North America. We don't. We see a market that is still quite mature. So, the numbers are pretty simple, right? Average household today in the U.S. has about 2.9 televisions. We have very minimal population growth, very minimal household formation growth. Some of that is still a cyclical trend coming out of the recession. You didn't have households forming. And so we see the TV market as a relatively flat to slightly down market in terms of unit volume. We don't see the average number of sets per household growing, and again, we don't see the number of households growing, and so you don't get a lot of growth because you already have really high ownership rates. So it is, as Paul alluded to, a replacement market. And so where you get the growth in the TV market is within the segments. And that's why we spend so much time in the industry talking about things like Ultra HD and some of these other segments. So here's a look at connected television, smart TVs. You can see last year was about 30% of TV volume. This year it'll be about 40% of TV volume, and we see that growing from there. So when you've got a mature market, you start to look within the segments, and that's where you get the growth. Whether that be in the kind of the cell phone market, you tend to look at smartphones, whether that be in the digital camera market, and you tend to look at things like DSLRs or mirrorless. We do the same thing in the TV segment, and that's why we spend so much time focusing on Ultra HD. So here's a view of our current projections for Ultra HD. As Jack alluded to, we tracked 77,000 shipments last year. Important to remember that's with a K, not with an M. We're looking at thousands of units still in this market, not millions of units yet. We do see the market growing. Right now, our current projections, which we published in January, call for about 500,000 units. We could raise that estimate. Paul was at just under 900,000 for the year, and you're seeing a number of firms come in within that range, in that 700,000 to 900,000 figure. To put that in perspective, this is the share of total TVs sold in that year. So we see that just under 1% and then growing from there. By 2017, we're at 8%. So to put that in perspective with Jack's figures, he sees by 2015, not the number the percentage of units being sold, but the actual household adoption rate being in that 3 to 4% range. So in the US, you've got about 120 million households. So to get to that figure, then you need annual volume of 3 to 4 million compared to where we are today of about 1.5 million. So that just allows you to see the perspective difference. We tend to change the numerators and denominators around, but the numbers will stay the same. So their forecast for the U.S. market is actually pretty robust and pretty aggressive, considering by 2017 they see about 15% of households owning the technology. To get to that type of adoption rate, that installed base, you're going to need 7 or 8 million units on an annual basis to get an installed base of 15%. And then clearly by the time you go to 25% in 2018, you're going to need 10 to 12 million on an annual basis. So here's just a look at our forecast and how our forecasts have changed over time. And again, we will publish a new forecast in about a month, and so you'll have revisions not only for the current year but for the remainder of the time horizon. We'll go out to 2018 with that new forecast release. I think the other key thing to think about within this market is that with any new technologies, with any nascent technologies, we tend to see about half of the annual volume show up in the fourth quarter of the year. And that's been true across every category that I've ever looked at, from Blu-ray players to tablets. For new categories, about half the annual volume shows up in the fourth quarter. And then as the product matures, then that tends to become a replacement product, and we see annual volume spread relatively evenly across the 4 calendar quarters. And so when you're looking at Ultra HD, I think Paul alluded to this as well, this will largely be a back half of the year, and especially a fourth quarter phenomenon. And that's where, so with Paul's 800,000 units, we would expect to see the bulk of that, at least 50 to 60% of that, show up in the fourth quarter. So I will go ahead and end there, and we'll turn it back to Jeff. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys. Sorry for the lack of time there, but the good news is that I'm going to be conducting some supplemental interviews after this presentation, after this conference. So if you can stick around, and Jeff's talking about that, then we will be able to get some of this extra information recorded and ready to go. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Wilkinson. I'm the editor of AVS Forum and also a host of the podcast Home Theater Geeks on the twit.tv network. And as soon as I get my stoplight clock here going, I'm going to try and stay on time. A futile effort, I know, but one can always try. So the next panel we have coming up is for 6 people. It is What You Can See, a panel of TV manufacturers talking about what we might expect for your next TV. So if I could get, it looks like we have chairs set up here. Get everybody up here. Come on up.